cognitive versus motivational systems. So now in typology, there's kind of two kind of systems, and I will show them more exhaustively. But the main points is that cognitive are bottom up, and they are more ST. I mean, bottom up oftentimes mean that you start with the sensory and after you go to the intuition. But so it's more ST and more TI-FE access, and it's more cognitive to behavior. So now we'll represent that after. But motivation is top down, so it's start more with the intuition and after goes to the sensory. So it's more that you have some patterns, and after with the patterns you find the sensory. It's more the FIT axis, and it's instincts to mechanics. So cognitive versus motivational. So I think universally behaviors fit well with FE. It's like, okay, in the moment, what are your kind of actions, in terms of feelings? Mechanics more, okay, what are your kind of patterns across the board? Your thinking patterns that I see in the extroverted realms. It's more mechanics. Your connection is like, okay, what is your inner working? It's like, not even the word, inner working. It's more TI. It's more okay. It's more your cognition, and instincts more okay. What are your charges, your impulsions? So it's more FI. So I do think that universally, they do align. So behaviors or state, it's more universally FE or DE, more largely DE, but you can see you can say FE. Mechanics or role, I think it's more universally TE. Also OE to some capacity, you can say. Cognition, or perception. I mean, perception maybe not the right word actually that I wrote. But universally is more TI or OI. And instincts, motivation, it's more universally FI and DI. So I also represented, behavior is more at the top. So it's the most conscious, you can say. The most apparent. While instincts is more at the bottom, so it's more the most unconscious to some degree, you can say, and the least apparent, even though instinct sometimes can be more apparent, but than cognition per se. And I do think they do fit in terms of axis. So I think that the FIT axis is more an axis that is about the instincts and the mechanics, and I think that the TI-FE axis is more about the cognitions to the behaviors. So now you see me coming, that the cognitive is actually more cognitions to behaviors, and that motivational is more instincts to mechanics. And I represent the top down and bottom up. Remember that top down is more the motivational, and bottom up is more the cognitive. So it's kind of really what is happening in typology with the different system that I talked about previously. So because of the hierarchy of the functions position, there's value inserted, and Carl Jung saw them as cognitive functions. Now, I think that's interesting that, Carl Jung talked about archetypes, and with archetypes, he talked a lot about instincts, finding, numinosity with emotions, and because of that, they appear. So they are less general. It's more like, okay, instincts, they might be too general. It's really when they find luminosity in the psyche, and it shows some kind of emotions that the archetypes are there. So weirdly enough, he did see that archetypes are more instinctual, and now they are seen in the present. They are still, kind of instinctual. But with types, he saw them as more cognitive functions. So I'm not sure as cognitive, like So I wonder if it's more that he tried to be very scientific about types, because he saw that it was more, he could track them more in people. So he tried to do more a cognitive map and go to the kind of bottom-up process. So I wonder what was his thinking about that. But I think it's really important to realize that with archetypes he went with the instincts, and with types he went with the cognition aspect. And I think that's worthy enough, because Carl Jung was really much about the instincts, but he said that they are cognitive functions. I think that's why I think that's why, because that types become kind of really kind of both compared to other systems. Other system like the Big Five, it's more like behaviors and mechanics. It doesn't have cognition, doesn't have instincts, and Enneagram is more like behaviors to instincts, I would say, or instincts to mechanics to some capacity. But Carl Jung really narrowed that. He talks so much about instincts and cognition that I think, not so much cognition actually, but the fact that he named them cognitive functions, I think it really kind of blends something there. But yeah, both frames are important. It is harder to have a good motivational system. It is to be mistaken as a cognitive system. So yeah, it's really harder to have a good motivational system. I think most systems out there are motivational, but yeah, it's easier to be mistaken as a cognitive system, because the cognitive system is really like, okay, maybe you have narrowed down the middle process, but the beginning process and the end process is really hard. It's like, okay, it's really hard to really map how the cognition will manifest at the end, and the behavior. So yeah, it's just very hard to do a mechanic map with the cognitive system. So yeah, I think it's harder to read the messiness of human with the cognitive approach. Yeah, certainly. It's also too rigid and can lose the motivation behind the math. So yeah, so in mistakes, so another typology system, they often do the skill versus the non-skill, and I think it's just because they forget how the instincts and mechanics actually are in the game actually. So they just think that, okay, because you have some type of connection, you will be bad at certain type of skills there and good there. So I think it's too rigid, and the problem is too much abstraction. I think that with the cognitive system, you can just, okay, maybe you have mapped the thing right, but you're not so sure how it came out. So because of that, you just do a lot of abstractions, are too little sometimes. Like you just do the cognitive map, or you just move a sample like a logistic, and and you have like no abstraction to explain it. You're just like, that's how it works, and whatever. But that's also a problem with the mechanics, I would say. So but yeah, the beginning and end process, input and output, is easy for the cognitive. So actually the contrary of what I just said, actually, the beginning and end process. Yeah, it's more that the middle process can be filled with abstraction or little abstraction, so it's just the result. So I contradict myself, I think, but I said that the middle process is known and not the beginning and the end process. But it's more, I think, yeah, it's more the contrary, that the beginning and end process is known, but the process can be in the middle can be filled with a lot of abstraction. So that's why the cognitive to behavior can have a lot of problem, that you actually don't know what is going on, even if you have some kind of result. But yeah, it can be filled with abstraction problems. For motivation system, we have the huge problem of the interpretation factor. Yeah, so it's less rigid how it start. Like OPS has that, like Savior's Demons, like yeah, I know that Binary Coin and Savior Demon, they're sort of rigid. It's like, but it's like, because you deal with instincts, not the most rigid form. It's like universally, it's not really rigid. Like if you talk about Saviors and Demon to people, like they don't see it as like, in their mind it's not rigid. It's like Saviors and Demon are pretty flexible, and they are harder to see. So it's really a big interpretation factor for oftentimes with the motivation systems, and yeah, inferring cognition because of motivation. So yeah, so over time you can think there's some cognition, sort of validity, just because there are some instincts behind it. That's also a problem. It's also more complex by nature to look at instincts and motivation, even though cognition is not simple either. Yeah. So that's kind of true that instincts are kind of harder to pin down. So yeah, that's kind of my talk about cognitive and motivational.